Hi everyone, I'm Rosemary, and today I'm going to be painting this pineapple lantern. These are so cute and they're great for patios for the summer that's coming up. And you can put a little tea light in it, or you could put fairy lights in it, and it's a pretty simple piece, but it will teach you dry brushing, and a lot of people have a lot of problems doing dry brushing properly. So what we're going to do first is I'm base coating the entire piece, all of it, including the leaves here, the inside, well, the inside, no, the inside I did in mustard, but the base coat on the outside is Mako's terracotta, or something similar. If you have something in a rusty kind of a family, it's something that you use, that's also fine. So you always, most of the time, put a darker color on the background and dry brush a lighter color over it. Not always, but that's what I usually do. So I always start with the bottom, as you can see, and I will be base coating the entire piece in the terracotta. Now when you base coat, you don't want to leave your paint not even. Make sure that you pull that paint out as far as it'll go before you dip for more paint, or it will dry. And if you dry with ridges in your application, when you dry brush, those ridges will pop even more, because when you dry brush, you hit the raised area of the design. And if your brush strokes are showing and they're raised, they will be accented even more when you do your dry brushing. So nice and smooth. Okay, so you'll have to bear with me while I put this base coat on, but it gives you an idea of how to put the colors on properly. Now I put enough color in my brush to start with, because I have a big area and I can spread it out. If I was doing a very little area, I wouldn't put this much paint in my brush to begin with. Okay, just spread, and now you have a lot of crevices on this, so you want to wiggle that brush in the crevices. You also want to get into all these little holes, which I'm not going to take the time to do, but you have to do that. Otherwise, they're going to show. The white in the holes will show. So I will just get the base coat on here. And then you should let it dry. You have more time than I do to let it dry. So you let it dry before you go to your dry brushing. It's a pretty color, the terracotta. I use, excuse me, I use a lot of Mako's acrylics, which I really, really like. But I package up a lot of kits for local libraries. And when I package up the kits for the local libraries, I like to use the Gare because it comes in big pints. Gare is out of production on them right now, so I'm probably going to have to use a lot more of the Mako, which is a little more costly, but it's a great product. And now since Mako has Duncan, they have two great products. So, but if you find a line of paints that you like anywhere, any acrylics, water-based acrylics, and you're comfortable with them, use them. Okay, so I'm wiggling in these crevices because if you dry brush and you have white showing in your crevices like so, like there, okay, when you dry brush you hit the raised area, the crevices stay. So if you don't get the terracotta color in the crevices, it will stay white. Now if that happens and you missed a spot, you can always go back with a small brush after you dry brush and fill in those little areas. This is the most time-consuming part of the piece, but it's important. Every step that you take when you're painting is important. Okay, am I almost around? Almost around. Nice and smooth, and I go back and make sure, and when you look at things upside down, you always see the spots that you've missed. And it's a good idea to always look at it from all different directions, because then you see crevices from a different angle. Now I'm base coating also the leaves in this terracotta color. I didn't get up there yet, but I am. Now that one little well of paint did almost the entire piece. I might need a little bit more to do the leaves, but I went all the way around with that one little well of paint that I have here. Okay, so now I need to probably put a little bit more paint in my palette to do the leaves. Okay, just a little bit more. And it should dry pretty fast if you put it on properly. I'm going to hold it from the inside here. And I'll start doing the leaf area. Pineapples are very popular this year. I don't know if they've always been popular. From what I remember, they were a symbol of welcomeness in your home many, many years ago. People used to hang pineapple wreaths and different things to make people feel welcome when they came into their homes. So everything goes around, comes around. I've been in ceramics so long that I've seen things that were popular 40 years ago coming back in style again. Okay, I've got the top done. Now I have to get this part done. Now you have a lot more crevices up here to make sure you wiggle in. I may not get it as perfect as you, and you don't have to rush it. Take your time. Nobody's pushing you to finish this item very fast. So take your time and make sure that it looks good. I always tell my students when I teach a class, you're working within, when I teach in the libraries especially, they have a 2-hour class. So in 2 hours, sometimes it's hard to get perfection. I always say the next day, when you wake up, take a look at it and tweak it. Meaning go back and look and fix up the spots that you missed the night before. Because when you're rushing to keep up with everyone and to get the piece done in the 2 hours, you're not as perfect as you can be. So you go the next day and you take a look at it. I need more of the terracotta. I think I need more for the leaf area than I do for the bottom. And like I said, check it off, check it the next day. You're not in a hurry. I'm rushing only because I'm doing a video. And I want you to get all the information you possibly can in my time with you here. So just keep it nice and smooth. Take your time and let it dry before you dry brush. You see, I'm not going to have that opportunity because I have to dry brush as soon as I finish painting the base coat. Okay, so my base coat is on. It's not perfect, but for showing you how to do it, it's close enough. And I can always go back tomorrow and tweak it, like I said. Okay, so crevices, make sure those crevices are covered. And I'm sure I've missed a lot of spots, but you get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to stop at that point. Now, as fast as the paint dries on the piece, I can touch it and have nothing on my hands already. It dries in the hairs of your brush. So don't ever bang brushes in the bottom of the bowl. Swish them, and until you can get to a sink to wash them properly, just lay them across the top of the bowl. That's what I do. So they don't sit in the water, because if you leave your brushes sitting in the water, the glues come out, and the glue loosens and loosens the handle of the brush from the hair part, from the ferrule. This is called the ferrule, where the metal meets the wood. Okay, so now I'm going to dry brush mustard. This is Gare's mustard. If you have something like a golden ochre, golden yellow in Mako, you can use that. Now this is a dry brushing brush. I'm using a very large dry brushing brush. You can use whatever you're comfortable with. When you dry brush, I pick up a little bit more than I want in my first application, and I blend it into the hairs of the brush by twisting and turning the brush in all different directions to get the hairs of the brush coated evenly. Now I do it again, and a lot of people I see when they dry brush, they do this. No, but then you didn't get the paint out of the other side of the brush. Twist that brush around and get the paint evenly distributed. Now when you first start to dry brush, you start with a light hand, just to get the feel of how much brush you have, how much paint you have in the brush. Now you don't dry brush point in, you dry brush more with the flat side of the brush, that you leave the crevices showing. Okay, now dry brushing, if it goes on wet, like mine is going on right now, that means you have a little bit too much paint in the brush. Okay, and what will happen with that is when you go to do a second coat, if your first coat is still wet, it may lift it. Okay, but until you get the feel of how much is in the brush, start out with a very, very, very light hand. I had a gentleman once tell me, who taught a class at my shop years ago, he should be able to come by and pull the brush right out of your hand when you first start. And then when you get the feel of how much is left in the brush, you can press a little bit harder. Now what I'm doing in slow motion is I am sweeping, and I'm using the flat side of the brush, and I am sweeping. Okay, now I can put this on a little bit heavier than I would on other things because the whole piece is going to be the mustard color. But then again, you don't want it too wet because, like I said, if you go to do a second coat, it can sometimes lift that second coat. Okay, now each time I dip, I put a little bit of paint in the brush, and I mean hardly anything. Blend it into the hairs of the brush in all different directions so there's no puddle on any section of the brush. Again, start out with a light hand. This brush is losing hairs. Start out with a light hand until you get the feel. See, mine, it's very wet going on, and it's not really the way it's supposed to go on, but I'll work with it. With a very light hand. Now the next section I do, I can press a little harder because I know that there's not much in the brush. Now I'll turn my brush around. I have a brush that's shedding. Okay, turn my brush around and use the other side of the brush. The other side of the brush has just as much paint as the first side that I used. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Now that there's nothing in the brush, even though you think that there's nothing in the brush, there is paint in that brush. And I'm backtracking onto the first area that I did. I'm like doing 2 sections at a time. Look at the difference in the color now as versus the one I just put on. All right, so each time I dip, I go forward and then I go back. Meaning I'll start here on a new section with a light hand, do 2 or 3 sections because this is a small area here. Turn the brush around, use the other side of the brush, and always flat, never point in, always flat. You see my crevices are staying the dark color. Okay, now I'm going to backtrack again. When there's less in the brush, sweep, 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 sweep. Even though I'm doing it fast, I'm using the flat side of the brush. And when there's nothing in that brush, it works very well. Now you might be more comfortable with a smaller brush. To me, the bigger brush is better on these areas, but you have to make sure you take out of your brush enough of the paint. You don't want to be painting the piece, it's dry brushing. Now again, I'm going back onto the first area I did, onto the second area. I keep blending everything together. You can go the other way. Okay, so you see it's coming there, but you see what a difference in these two? That's the same color, but it's the constant application of the colors that makes a difference. But there's also some yellow on this. Okay, let's go again. I'll still go on this side now. No matter how much I take out of the brush, there's a lot of excess when you first put your brush down on the surface and when you first dip for more paint. Now I'm doing the rest of the piece. Now everything has one coat. Now I'm going back onto what I first did. When I have nothing in the brush, I go back over, and even though there's nothing in the brush, there is. When you're dry brushing properly, and it's really dry, mine is a little wet, you will actually see a powder forming on the table in front of you. And you may think there's nothing in that brush, but there still is, because if you press, now you can press hard. Keep your piece down on the table and hold on to it. And now you can press harder, because there is nothing in the brush. But there is, because I am getting the golden color. Your brushes do get abused, though. They don't last too long because of the, the pounding on the surface. All right, now that's one coat, but I still need a lot more here, whereas this area might have 2 and 3 coats. So you just keep going until you like the way it's coming out. I'll start here now. Light hand, I'm holding it very lightly right now until I get all that moisture out of the brush. There's a little bit too much moisture in my brush right now. I know I keep saying the same things over and over, but I want to stress these things, and then maybe you won't have as much trouble when you dry brush. And it's practice. Everything that you do is practice. The more you do, the easier it gets. Now I have nothing in the brush. I'm going back again over these areas. And you may think there's nothing, but there definitely is something in that brush. Okay, so you can see down here I wasn't hitting the bottom enough. And I see a white crevice that I have. Now I could take a small brush and touch that up with the terracotta. All right, now I could do this a couple of more times. I'm not going to because I want to move on and show you how to do the yellow, but you can work on it more until you get it more even than mine is. That's not too bad. Okay, that's a pretty color too, but now I put some yellow. And you see how little, I didn't even fill that well up, and I didn't even use half of it. So don't waste your color, just put a little bit out, and you don't need much at all. Now with the yellow, I put very, very little out of the yellow over here. Nice clean palette, right? You could tell I work. Okay, oh, let's take out these hairs again. Yeah, some of these brushes, if the glue is not holding on to all of the hairs in here, they shed. I just pulled them out because I really like this brush. A dry brush, I don't know if it's ox hair or what kind of hair it is, but it's stiff hair, but you don't want it to be stiff all the way down here where there's nothing left of the hairs in the brush. This still has some softness to it. I don't know if I explained that right, but okay, so now I'm picking up the yellow and I'm putting some yellow in with a very, very, very light hand. And that's how I got the brightness on that one. Now, see the difference? Okay. And you control how much you put on. You do one coat, you like it, you do two coats, it's up to you. And you're putting this on the same way that you put on the mustard color. And again, it's flat, 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 but I do it fast. And you're not keeping your brush on the surface, you're actually picking it up off the surface. In slow motion, this is what I'm doing. And I see, another thing I see a lot of people do, they'll go like this and go like this and go like this. Now, stay in a given area. Stay here until your eye starts to see that it's looking better or more like the way you want it. And then move on to the next section. Don't go all over the place. What you see is what you get. So even though there's nothing left in that brush, I'm still getting yellow out of it. Okay, again, very, very little. I just tip it. You see how you could see the wetness there? That's all I put in. And then take it out of both sides of the brush. Make sure you're going against the grain. You can go in all directions against the grain on this piece because the grain goes in two directions. Light hand until you get rid of the wetness in your brush. Now, if you find that you're dry brushing and it's lifting the color and you're going back to the terracotta, that means it's too wet in that spot. So just go away from it for a while. It needs to dry. It will eventually work, but it's just wet. And so that's why if you put your color on too wet, that's what's going to happen. Now, I could keep doing this. It's not as yellow as that one, but I think you get the idea. So I'll leave this one a little darker. Like I said, there's no right or wrong. My hairs are shedding all over the place here. Okay. And when you have one of the colors out, you can do the inside. I didn't do it. On this one I did. My finished one I did. I used the mustard. You could put the terracotta, you could put the green, you could put whatever you want on the inside. Okay? Now, when you go, switch your brush to go to the green. Do not wash your brush. All right? Unless you have another brush, your next color will clean the previous color out of your brush. Close my colors up. Okay, so now I'm using, this is also Gare's, and I'm using their green. It's dark green, and you only need a drop of that. So now I pick up the green in my brush. I put a little bit more than I normally would want. And look how fast it changed. You don't even need to, you don't need to wash your brush. And if you have a wet brush, it does not dry brush properly. Okay, I can tell if I go to help someone in a class and I pick up their brush, I can say, uh-oh, you put it in water. I can tell right away. You want the dryness with just the paint. So now on this, I start out against the grain. See that? I'm going sideways, but I will fill in a lot more. Okay, I will fill in a lot more. And if you want, you don't have to put the terracotta on the top. I think it adds something to it. You can just start out with the green and dry brush some yellow, but I like the terracotta underneath it. And I always find when I'm teaching a class, I find it best if we base coat the item in all one color. And now you can't always do that, but it works, especially when I teach kids classes, because if they don't base coat the entire piece in one color, they have a lot of white spots all over the place, because it's very hard to butt colors up against each other. Okay, so now in the second coat, I'm putting it on a little bit heavier. Over here, I'm going to go this way because I don't want all that terracotta showing. Like I said, keep an eye on what you're doing, the area that you're working in. And watch how the paint is going on. So if it's going on, like over here, it was going on too much against the grain, I'm going this way to fill in a little bit because I want more green on the top. I don't want as much terracotta showing. You control the brush, you control how you want your piece. Okay, I do need a little bit more. Now, when you dry brush on a flat surface, that's a little more tricky. And I kind of do a pounce and a pull, and everybody goes, what is that, a pounce and a pull? Well, you're dry brushing a little bit, but you're kind of pouncing it also, because if you pull too much, it lifts it up. I'll just finish going around this, and I'll show you on the top part how I did that, because you could see I do have it covered, but I have some of the terracotta showing through also. Now on the one I did here, I have a little bit more green on it. You control it, like I said, you put as much green as you want on it. This one I'm going to stop here because I think there's enough for you to get the idea. Okay, so now I'm picking up a little bit more of the green, still taking it out, and on this flat surface, I'm using the flat side of the brush, never point in, and if you could see my brush leans the way I dry brush, and I'm kind of pouncing and just a little pull, but more of a pounce. Okay. And one brush load will do this whole area in here. And then if you want it a little deeper, you can do a second coat. I keep twisting my brush around to get all the paint from all of the hairs. And as I'm going around, I can touch up in here where I see that I don't have any of the green showing. Like I said, pounce with the side of your brush. It's never point in, it's the side. See that? Now that's one coat. You can always do more. Go back and touch up all those edges. Now it's a little trickier to go to the yellow in the brush now, so you might want to have a second dry brushing brush and then highlight. Oh, okay, first what I did, let me just tell you what I did with the green before you do that with the brush. Okay, now take the green out of your brush as much as you possibly can. And I'm just going to give some highlights. I don't know if you can see it. I have some very light green highlights in here. Just very lightly. Like nothing. You see that there? Just like almost nothing. And you don't have to do that. I'm doing it on every other section, every other swirl that goes down. I don't dip again. There's nothing in that brush. And that's what I want. I want nothing. And you could go over it a second time. Not dipping. I do not dip again. This is only one brush load to do the entire piece. Okay, you see a little bit of green in there? Now that's up to you. You can do that. You don't have to do that. It's whatever you want. So now I'm going to try to use the same brush to do the yellow highlights that I did on the top of the pineapple leaves. See the little bit of yellow there? because I don't have another dry brushing brush handy right now. So I'm going to put a lot of the yellow in my brush to clean out the green. And it'll give me a lime color. Look at that. All right, so that's perfect. If I want a little more yellow, I'll just do it a second time and take all of it out of the brush again. And then I just go around and do the points. Now, if it comes on heavy like that, where I don't like it, well, it's still wet. I take my finger and I blend it. Or you get more out of your brush. I have a very big brush here, so it makes a difference. Now, can you see that little bit of yellow I did on the top? And then I'm going to do it on the top of these leaves on the lower half of the top of the pineapple. All right, and if I don't like it, if I think it's on heavy, I use my finger to blend it. That's just my way. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's just my way. I find that works. That's why I said you have to find what works for you. Okay? And you could put as much yellow as you want. I'm just going across the areas here a little bit now because I have more green on the top here, so I want to accent it a little bit with a little bit of yellow. And I could do that here also. So you play. It's playing. And the worst case scenario is if you don't like the way it came out, you could recoat the entire piece and start again, as long as your paints are not heavy, heavy, heavy. Okay, there you go. See the highlights on the top? I always feel like sun shines down and all of the tips of pieces should be a little bit lighter. And just keep playing, keep blending. And it's similar. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar. Okay? Now, Gare also makes, I wanted to show you this, they make a pineapple canister, which is really cool because what I do with these when I'm teaching a class, I glaze the insides for them. And then I bring it to the class where it's already glazed on the inside and then it's food safe. Oh, there we go. And this has a little groove over here where it fits in, the cover fits in perfectly. And this is a really nice piece. I should have demonstrated on this because I have to do this for a library class also. But I wanted you to see that also. So Gare has available the lantern and they have the canister. And I believe they have salt and peppers and they may even have other items, I'm not sure. But it looks great with a tea light on your patio or the fairy lights. I love the fairy lights. I think they're great. I think they're brighter. I think they shine more. They get to the top more. I did an Eiffel Tower the other day. And even though the Eiffel Tower is very tall, I just laid the fairy lights in the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. And it lit up the whole Eiffel Tower. So I think they work great. And you can get them on Amazon in bunches. Sometimes I sell them 5 or 10 in a bunch. I think someone said the dollar store, maybe Michael's. I'm not positive, but if you have any questions, you have any concerns, please email me at roecer@gmail.com. And thank you for taking the time to watch this video and for enjoying ceramics. And have a great summer. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it. Thank you again.